In February 1959, 9 experienced hikers set off into Russia's Ural Mountains. They never came back, and what searchers eventually found made international headlines for all the wrong reasons, in a mystery that's remained unsolved for over 60 years. The group, mostly students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, was led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. They were experienced outdoorsmen, well prepared for winter conditions, aiming to reach a remote peak roughly 200 miles into the wilderness, a difficult but not unprecedented trek for a group of their skill level. Originally 10 hikers set out together. One member, Yuri Yudin, turned back early due to illness, a decision that likely saved his life and left him to spend the rest of his own life trying to understand what happened to his friends. The plan was straightforward: reach the peak, then report back to their sports club roughly 3 weeks later. When that check-in date passed with no word from the group, concern quickly turned into an organized search. A search party eventually located their final campsite. What they found was immediately wrong. The tent had been cut open from the inside, not unzipped, cut, and abandoned in the middle of a freezing night, as if something had made staying inside feel more dangerous than the cold itself. Footprints led away from the tent down toward the forest edge, some hikers wearing only socks, some with a single shoe, some completely barefoot, in temperatures that would have been brutally, dangerously cold within minutes. The first 2 bodies were found near a large cedar tree at the forest's edge, dressed only in underwear despite the freezing conditions. Investigators noted broken branches high up the tree, suggesting one of them had climbed it, possibly to look back toward the camp or to escape something on the ground. The initial 2 deaths appeared consistent with hypothermia, but as searchers recovered more bodies over the following weeks, that explanation stopped making sense. Some victims had fractured skulls and severe internal chest injuries, the kind investigators said were consistent with being struck by a car, yet there was no external bruising, and critically, no other footprints at the scene besides their own. The Soviet investigation, closed after roughly 3 months, attributed the deaths to a vague, unexplained compelling natural force, offering no further detail and closing the file to public access for decades. That vagueness, more than anything, is what opened the door to 60 years of competing theories. Investigators later found unusual levels of radioactivity on some of the hikers' clothing. Some connected it to a nuclear disaster that had occurred in the region 2 years earlier, since one hiker had lived in the contaminated zone. Others saw it as evidence the group had stumbled into something the government didn't want investigated. Over the following decades, theories multiplied. Some pointed to a secret Soviet weapons test gone wrong. Others suggested an encounter with a creature local Mansi people called a mink. Some proposed a simple, brutal argument between the hikers that spiraled violently out of control, though investigators found no evidence supporting that particular theory. In 2019, Russian officials formally reopened the case after decades of public pressure. The leading modern theory, refined by a team of Swiss researchers in 2021, points to a rare and specific kind of slab avalanche, one triggered by wind-packed snow accumulating on a slope that seemed far too gentle for a typical avalanche. Their research modeled how a precise combination of terrain, a cut the hikers themselves made into the slope to pitch their tent, and hours of relentless wind-driven snow accumulation could trigger a delayed slab release capable of causing exactly the kind of severe, non-fatal internal injuries found in the autopsies, all without leaving the obvious debris pattern of a typical avalanche. It's a genuinely plausible scientific answer, and likely the closest thing to a real explanation this case will ever get. But plausible isn't quite the same thing as certain, and for many who have studied this case closely for decades, the full picture still doesn't completely, comfortably add up. Even researchers who support the avalanche theory acknowledge it doesn't neatly explain every detail, like why the group cut their way out rather than simply unzipping the tent, a decision that still reads as pure panic rather than a calm, deliberate response to a slow-moving snow slide. Udin, the 10th hiker who turned back early, spent the rest of his life attending memorials for his friends and giving interviews about that final goodbye. He always said the not knowing was, in some ways, harder than grief with a clear answer would have been. The pass itself is now a minor pilgrimage site for hikers and mystery enthusiasts, some retracing the group's original route, drawn by the same remote, striking landscape that the original 9 never made it out of. The tent cut from the inside, the radiation, the specific pattern of injuries, small details still resist fully easy explanation even under the leading theory. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of history's most thoroughly investigated mysteries that still isn't entirely, satisfyingly closed. Follow for more stories where the evidence, even decades later, raises more questions than it definitively answers.